Columbia. You have been chosen to be my lamb. I have brought you here to build the great city in the sky. We will succeed where government has failed. The Lord has blessed you all to provide Columbia grand designs of grace. Build great monuments for our salvation, and you will be rewarded with life eternal. Forsake your duty to Columbia, and the false shepherd will consume our great city, just as the land below, cast in the eternal flames of damnation with their equality.
Alright, enough of that guy. That was a lot of red flags and probably the worst job interview I've ever seen. Getting kidnapped? Who does that? But, you know, I usually like to give 3 chances before I decide to walk away from something. Well, with that out of the way, welcome to my review of Skyrise. For this review, it will only be the collector's edition. And why is this here? If you did not see my unboxing video, I have the retail version of Skyrise that I am going to put for the 2024 giveaway. Included with this will be the Kickstarter exclusive metal key and coin that go together, and these wooden scoring hexes. Main difference between the games, the collector's edition has tons of quality of life improvements. I actually don't know what this is in here because I haven't opened it, but I've seen pictures in the game manual, and it doesn't affect play compatibility or functionality, just aesthetics. If you're wondering why Brass Birmingham is being shown, they're both games made by Roxley. They both have involvement of Gavin Brown, but for some reason there's a weird thing about Skyrise that reminds me a lot of Brass, and it's small nitpick stuff. Skyrise has 2 errors, like Brass has 2 errors. They have real historical figures that they're used for their player character boards. The manual is also kind of the same with the explanation of the backstories of the people. So for example, we have this. Brass also has this. The art, it's really good for the era that it's trying to portray. And you're building networks kind of in a different way. There is also like a weird bidding system, without money, of course. I know I'm missing some similarities with Brass, so let me down in the comments if there's anything else that comes to mind. I'm going to start the video off different than most people. I'm actually just going to start right now with the pros. Again, this is a reminder, I am reviewing the collector's edition, not the core retail edition, so I'm going to have all the fancy quality of life improvements. Again, the retail edition does not affect any of the gameplay stuff. You're not missing anything by not getting the collector's edition. And sadly, it is a Kickstarter exclusive according to what they put on Kickstarter. Usually Roxley's pretty good about selling Kickstarter stuff independently, but I guess it would cost too much to sell it at retail? I'm not sure. Hopefully they change their mind in the future. Pros of this game. This game has a lot of planning. I actually enjoy planning and scheming, hence why I am a big... that's why I love Brass. Plotting out locations on the board and what you're going to get and how to score your objectives and secret objectives. Lots of thoughtful planning. For the collector's edition, the components are amazing. Every building has a unique design. These boards have a unique design. They're all different. They look similar, but they have small little niche things. The coloring, the art style, great. The game is actually very easy to learn, which is a huge pro. But with that, it is also very deep.
Alright.
This game is really not a table hog, which is unique for how board games have been going lately. But in a 3x3 area that we have up here, it's usually, if I zoom out, the table is a 6x3 table. And we usually play by a 3x4 area. Bigger games take up a lot more space. This, everything fits pretty much on the main board and a few, about 6 inches on each side for player boards. Now, Coulter usually doesn't like games that are super complex and deep, so he says this is a huge pro because it is simple, which makes him not want to X himself. This insert is really good. I actually really like this. I thought First Game Trays was involved, but it seems to be done all by Roxley. Usually one of my biggest gripes is how components don't get stored well in the box. They came up with this design to have sleeve cards, which is nice, but depending on card sleeve thickness, I guess. And there is some wasted space up on the top part. I'm not sure if this is going to be expansion content in the future. It is a very nice design to insert. there is no reason to actually like modify it, and your stuff stays fairly nice in here. And some of the smart things they did, like you can store the key and disc down below. The retail edition has just a plain open insert, and from the pictures, it's pretty much just some bars. The 3D boards here, I love this little stacking diagram that tells you how to place them back in the box. So you don't have to guess, you can just look at the bottom. Good quality of life improvement. The regular edition, I know the boards are flat, they're cardboard. This game also scales very well with player count. That's kind of rare. Most games don't scale well when they have a high player count or a low player count because they're usually designed for an optimization somewhere. And Skyrise does a phenomenal job. There is a caveat though with player size. There is a storage diagram on the box, which is really nice. I like this. It's fairly detailed, explains things fairly well. It's right there for easy access. Again, another quality of life improvement. It doesn't apply to the retail edition because you don't need to stack stuff. In most games, trying to get the first person done with whatever will usually set you up to be in the lead and help you win. Skyrise, very different. Being the first to place all your buildings doesn't necessarily going to win. This fits the whole, you really don't know until end game scoring. You can kind of have an idea if you're leading, but there's many times that you can be off. I have lost many games like that. And I like that because it keeps people engaged. Most games, when you are falling really far behind, it just feels like you're not getting anywhere. Why try? But because of Skyrise's nature, you don't know. So you're always going to be in the game mode. It never makes you feel left out. It is fun also to trick players with their bids. Getting people to waste their high bid buildings is really cool because it'll give you control later. And a lot of it is a ebb and flow mechanic of trying to figure out what the advantage is going to be for future turns. I enjoy scheming. I enjoy long-term plans. Alright, let's get to the meh. I like the endgame scoring system, but I know some people, they want to know, and it's really hard to calculate everything. Because usually, by the end of the first and second era, well, the first era, you're only going to be about in the 20-point range if you're doing well. And then in the second era, you're going to start scoring everything. So this is very deceptive on where you're winning. And it can throw people off. Like, it feels good until you realize how the end game scoring works, and it's just like, oh, I was way off. There is a lot of really 3D chess planning in this game, and it's going to cause analysis paralysis for certain players or personality types. I don't mind it, but it does bother me when someone's spending like 10-15 minutes. I mean, I spend like 2 minutes to 3 minutes for the most part trying to plan a move, and I think that's too much. So for people who are impatient and playing with those types of people, this might not work out for you. This game is incredibly deceiving on the skill curve. Because the rules are so simple, you don't think it's very complicated, but it is very complicated with your movement and placement, and I'll get to that when I do the how to play. One of the weird things that requires more testing, I've played about 12 games of Skyrise now with varying player counts, is the player boards. And it's not the player boards themselves, it is the building numbers that they start with. When I wrote this script out, I've played 2 more games after that, I've won 4 of the 10 games, and I've noticed that the red player has the highest advantage because they start with the highest building number in Era 1. This 94 will win all bids. It feels like an unfair advantage. I understand the idea behind it, and honestly, I think yellow might be better for late game, but having that early game control can give you a lot, and I think red might have an unfair advantage. More testing required. The red player here will always have the 94 during the first era, so they can win whatever they want. But with that, they're giving up their high piece. The panorama scoring is kind of weird. It's going to want you to meet certain objectives, like have 3 of your buildings surrounding a lake or a blimp. They're kind of hard to pull off because everyone's fighting for everything, and it's public knowledge fighting for these goals. And with that, it's going to cause a lot of your plans to go sideways. I view it as more of a bonus thing. I don't really think it's something you should purposely try to aim for, but if you end up pulling it off, good. The shoot for the moon mechanic, I've heard people nag on this and say that it feels wonky and weird. There's a logic to it I can see. Depending on your player count, you're going to get a bunch of these tokens available to fill these slots. And your third slot filled, you're going to get 6 points for every building on that color that you have. So if you have here yellow, every yellow spot that you have a building on is going to be worth 6 points at the end game scoring. But if you have 4 discs, you lose the 6 point bonus and it turns into a 4. And why it's doing that is because you're going to get 10 points per extra disc past number 4. So depending on player count and how people choose to grab what tokens, shooting the full moon can pay off. But most of the time, I've noticed people usually only get 1 bonus token for that color. And it's just the competitive nature of the game. It's really hard to monopolize on a single thing. I don't think it's a bad mechanic. I kind of like the concept of it, but it does kind of also feel more luck-based. The Wonder cards are unique in their aspect because some of their abilities are really strong and some of the abilities are meh. And I'm not sure how it really feels with balancing because they are 20 unique wonders. They all have different effects and it causes different play effects to trigger in the game. The only advantages that really come to it is the number placement at the top because lowest number is going to go first in error 2. But their effects are good to just not helpful at all, and I don't know if the numerical values help. Like number 1 is extremely strong, which feels unbalanced, yet number 4 here we have Atlantis is very simple. Just place your building, as long as you have 3 buildings next to water, you'll just get 8 points. So there is a balance to it. It's kind of weird. Now, this is just a personal meh thing about how tokens are placed. I have a bad habit of just grabbing clusters of tokens. It's randomly placed out in the bag, but I'm not the person that usually grabs one at a time. I'll grab a handful and I'll start dumping them on spaces. And right here we can already see that there's a lot of letters. They're different letters. Well, no, they're A and D, but it always feels like that to me when I do token randomization placement. I'm always grabbing clumps. Same with like card games. I always seem to shuffle clumps together. Alright, now let's go to the bad stuff. The secret objectives are kind of a give me in this game. And I say that because there's only 4 of them, and they're all the same mechanic. They just have different color combinations. This wants you to have 4 green buildings, or 4 green locations with build your buildings, brown, white, and yellow. There's only 4, not much variety to that. It seems kind of a give me. And I know I brought this up with the mess stuff, but more testing. But right now, red feels like it is the strongest color in the game for error 1. If you can get that lead, it kind of cements your placement in the game. This game is also, everyone is messing with everyone because everyone's goal is to outbid and place. So your plans are gonna go straight to hell. The consistency of this game is really difficult because, and the funny thing is, and this goes back to scaling the play group, in a one-on-one 2-player match, you can kind of do that. But then 3 adds more chaos, and then 4 just adds the super competitiveness and placement everywhere. Real estate gets tied up. So your long-term plans kind of go sideways. And that's just hard to build on a skill issue because sometimes it's just random chaos. This game is extremely unforgiving if you don't have a plan or can adapt to change. Your opponent is placing a building at a location that you want, that's part of your goal, like you want to get the blimps or the river, means you have to go somewhere else. And depending on how people build out their paths of buildings to get to those bid points, it's not going to work out the way you want it to. You can also be locked into bad placement choices. There's a lot of locking people out, and you can cascade effects to just placing all your buildings. It might not be optimal, but that's part of the gameplay mechanic I like, is forcing the trickery and the deception. Now, with the unknown scoring, there is a pressure to catch up on scoring, which comes down to how people perceive things. I don't think it's too bad, but I like these types of games. Other people don't like it when they see that they're at almost the end of Error 2, they're at 20 points, and other people are at like 53. And it just comes to put a pressure to make bad plays. I think that's part of game design, but I can see some people not liking that. The RNG of token scoring. So we have these guys up here. These hex tiles are going to get placed secretly under there, and they're going to have a score value, and that has to do with those letter tokens. You might not have the chance to deduce where the 8-point scoring token is going to be here, and you might not have that chance at all to actually get those because people will be fighting over and hogging them. I don't think it's too bad, but 8 points is a lot per token, so it kind of throws it out. I've won a few games just by collecting the high value tokens, all of them, and keep that information secret. The character boards, they are double-sided, but it has no effect on gameplay. The only thing that matters is you're starting buildings, and they're always the same. All blue will always have these options. There is no difference to that. I get it, but I also think it was kind of unnecessary to add it. But it doesn't really affect gameplay. So let's do the how to play or setup. How the game board determination is how many players, in this example we have 4, and the central island board. That determines how many board spaces that you're going to be using. And then you're going to use your handy dandy setup aid to remove tokens from the bag, this little chart here. This scorecard system's pretty nice too because it's simple and direct. And then for every empty space, draw tokens and fill. You're going to take your random hex tokens, shuffle them up, and then place them in order from A, B, C, and D. No one knows what they are until you get one of these tokens. And you're going to take your 5 panoramic cards, place out 2 of them, and these are going to be goals that are public goals that anyone can score. And then you're going to put out your little island control card, which is based on breaking ties by whoever has the most tallest buildings, middle buildings, and then tiny buildings. You do have your wonders. They're considered structures, not buildings. Kind of a weird thing. And then everyone's going to get a random secret objective. And depending on player count, everyone's going to get shuffled their wonder cards. These cards give wonders special abilities, and they are scored when they are played. Depending on player count, you get X amount. During Era 2, when it starts, everyone picks one of their cards and then flips it over. Lowest number is going to go first. It tells you for your first game not to care about it too much, but there is some plotting and scheming because some of the cards require that you do certain things to get them to happen. So, kind of important. And then everyone randomly chooses and rolls for who gets the player boards. I use just dice, and most of the time, like I said, people pick red because they have the highest number value building. Next, you're going to collect your buildings. So, we have your starter buildings don't have a dot. The buildings with the dot icon are going to be used in Era 2. So you're going to start with a pool of, I believe it's 7 buildings. And everyone has the same building amounts. All right. So the object of the game is you place bids in value order. So whoever goes first will place their first bid, their building, upside down. Got to start from the middle of the first round. And then it's up to players to determine if they want to outbid you by continuing by raising numbers. And this is where the strategy comes in the game, because if you force people to waste high number values to win that bid, they lose future control of the game. And I like this push-pull mechanic. Now, with that being said, there are plays that people can make that will force you, like blue, if they didn't have this 33 or 23, they would have to go to a higher building. And they might not want to give up that advantage. Most of the buildings, small buildings, all of them have low value numbers. But in continuation, they have to place the next building adjacent to the last place building. And bridges connect locations. We have a 23 there. That can't be played because that's bad. So 33. Yellow cannot play their lowest building because it's 32 and 21, so they would be forced to pass, which can feel kind of meh. And then we have green here, which also 34, so they'll place the next highest building, and they'll go back. Yellow is passed, yellow is out. They can't bid anymore, it's back to red. Red decides that they're going to start escalating, and they're going to put out a 72, which is going to force the blue player into making some wonky plays. And blue's values of numbers that can beat it is this 82. Do they want to play, or 73, they play the 73. So they'll play the 73 here. Yellow is out, next goes to green. Green player, out of their choices, they're going to have to do 84. And this is where it gets to the weird thing, because the red player now has to sit and decide, do they want to waste their 94? to win this location. It might not even be part of their scoring goal. Now, there's pros to this because when red wins this, they will take control of the disc automatically. All buildings are going to return to their owners. And red, being the winner, will get to place the new bid. Red will collect the disc, put it on their portrait, and what these allow is every time you get the corresponding alphabet disc, you can look at the score, or the secret point objective. So 5 points, which I believe is the second highest, 8 being the highest. And these are secret, and you keep them. You can share the information or you can keep it yourself, but it kind of goes both ways because you can mess with people with that. But by red winning here, red can now take their lowest value building, 24, and automatically win this placement because there is nowhere adjacent to place to. Or they could start in the middle. They don't have to do this, but leaving it open is allowing someone to steal it. Then they'd collect the white disc, and they'd put it in the slot. So what's with the discs? The discs are very interesting X Factor system. This is part of the secret scoring that makes a lot in Error 2 scoring. The discs also allow, like I said, if you filled the yellow track, now at end of game scoring, every location that you have a yellow building at is going to be worth 6 points. But there's nothing here to show. And if you shoot for the moon, every location is now worth 4 points, but every additional disc will be 10. So if you try to monopolize and get all the extra of one color, really good, but again, very difficult and inconsistent that I've seen. I have yet to experience where that strategy works well. It's helpful, but it doesn't seem that helpful. Then we have these other discs like this +1 disc. This +1 disc will go on your portrait, so here. And what it does is it adds +1 points to all the alphabet tokens, your shoot for the moon tokens, and +1 to itself for endgame scoring. That also includes the key. It is a 10-point token that technically goes on your player board. And the second place runner-up token, which is 4 points. So this would be 5 and the 10 would be 11. The tokens are really interesting and they add a lot to the variety of the X Factor. And this is going to continue until the end. The first player to place all their buildings at Error 1 will then trigger scoring, and it goes to Error 2. And scoring, you just follow this little card. I'm going to tell you, score island control, so whoever has the tallest building, because everyone starts with one tall building, so it's pretty easy to tell who's going to win the island. If for some reason that someone decided to do that, it's going to break down to whoever has the most medium-sized buildings, and so on. If it's still a tie, then they get to split the rewards. Easy way to know how this works is if it's a letter or the +1, a key, or the 4-point token, it's going to go on your portrait. If it's color associated with this disc, it fills here. During Error 2, you're going to pick one of your wonder cards, get access to your special buildings and your wonder, so you'll get access to all the leftover stuff. Pick your starting card out of the group, like this, the hammer. It's a 1, it's very strong. And in Error 2, there are some rule changes. You cannot place your wonder as your first building unless it is your last building or you have a card that allows you to. I think there's only one. The second huge difference is whoever places all their buildings during Error 2 first gets the key, and then they sit out and wait for another person to place all their buildings. The second player is going to get this coin. In a 2-player game, you don't get this, but in 3 or 4, you will get a second place coin. And it will continue until everybody places all their buildings. Leads to a lot of really interesting strategies, because if you control and placed all your buildings, you weren't really having a plan. You're just kind of throwing things to grab tokens and score random things. It leaves gaps that can be exploited by other players. And I bring that up as hypothetically, and this is really weird, I've never seen this happen, but if one player has placed all their buildings and have left this much of a mess, it allows the other players to start putting their lower buildings to get things that they might want. Like, they can see what tokens are left, and they can try to shoot for the moon or do other weird things or panorama scoring that kind of fits their goals. So being the first to place out everything, yeah, you get those 10 points, but these tokens are critical into your endgame planning. because you might actually know what letter token is the good token, and everyone else has gotten the bad tokens through random chance. So you can just sit there and start filling in the gaps to pick up what you want, being unopposed. And some of the goals you can do that people don't see. So it's a really neat system once everything starts getting crowded and pushed around, that the last player can kind of control how things are going to go. It gives them a huge advantage in seeing the game state. The 10 points, you're out now, you can't block, you can't force your opponents to move or to place bad building locations. It gives you an advantage, and that can be a huge difference in the points, because you can kind of control a lot by doing that. You can do placement to stop ties or just win. And by making last, you can literally sit here and be like, well, I can control this island instantly by placing the tallest building there and get that for scoring. The wonders are also really interesting because they are usually automatic wins. Again, you cannot place them as your first building unless a card lets you to, or it's the last building you have. And whatever happens when you place it, like if you have the hammer, it will have long-lasting effects. No one can place another tall building next to this wonder, which can cause a lot of chaos. You're not going to be able to fill up every board space on the map. It feels like you should be, but you can't. But as you can see, the board is fairly crowded, but there are still some open spaces, and this is all 52 buildings? And then finally comes the end game scoring, and this is where the buku points come in. So during Era 2, you will do the island control again. You're going to do the panoramic cards again, which you can score multiple times if you meet those requirements. Your secret objectives, which again is that 10-point color card here, which kind of feels like a give me. You're going to score your discs and keys. And then finally, you're going to break down and score by this. And this is really the big deciding factor on how you're going to score. Because red here, if they filled out this stuff, they would get tons of points. And this is where it gets really complicated and kind of a mess where you don't really know who's winning. But the simple thing is, highest points win. And I've seen this come up on Reddit. I was reading it, and I was kind of confused because some people were like, we can't break 100. And then other people were like, is it normal to break over 100 in this game? And I was like, yeah, in my experience, yeah. First game I played, we didn't really get the concept down, and I was playing really badly because I was just trying to win bids, not planning a long-term strategy. But as I played this game and understood it a little bit more, no, it's important and critical to have a long-term plan on your goals. And this game is about adapting. So sticking to one plan that doesn't work, you need to adapt. But it is fairly common to see people score around the 130 to 150 mark. Again, the only time I ever had that come up is the first game where I scored less than 100. Now, with player count. In a 4-player game, this is where the game shines in my opinion. It is a crowded mess. It can feel like luck, and I bring that up because of how the placement and everything is. And it comes down to outwitting your opponent and getting them to waste their high bids so you can control the locations and the placement. It's not always perfect, and it's going to be a lot of adapting. And that's pretty much the game. In a 2-player game, it's just back and forth and it's straight across. In a 3-player game, it adds that X factor that I really like. But in a 4-player game, this game definitely shines the best in my opinion. I've heard other reviewers say that this game is better 3. I don't think so. I think you really want all the tokens. It gives you that selection and choice. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel or subscribe to the channel. If I missed anything or messed something up, please put it in the comments. And if you want a chance to win the retail version of Skyrise, definitely look for my 2024 video and check it out. You don't have to subscribe to enter, but just leave a comment. And whenever I hit those milestones that I said in those videos, this will be up in the prize pool. Other than that, if you can do the standard YouTube things to help me out, really appreciate it. Take care, and GG's.